Most Australians hear about the federal budget every year, but few understand how it really works or what it actually means for our economy. The media often target specific areas without context, and often in education, the actual concept of the budget can be challenging to get across to people. So in today's video, we're here to explain how Australia's federal budget actually works, clearing up some misconceptions while also going into the important details that are often ignored so that you can have an informed understanding of how this all works. Australia's budget is a collection of financial and economic documents that project, model, plan, and finance the economy. Altogether, the budget in practice comprises of appropriation bills, which allows the government to collect and spend public money. The budget is mandated in the Australian Constitution and must receive the support of both houses of Parliament to be authorised. Prior to its introduction into Parliament, the Treasurer and their department develops it into two different stages: the portfolio budget statements and the mid-year economic and fiscal outlook. The budget must be approved by the Prime Minister and Cabinet before entering Parliament as well. By convention, the federal budget is delivered to Parliament on the second Tuesday in May. The Treasurer introduces it during the second reading of Appropriation Bill Number 1. And this is partly done out of convention, while in modern times it's to ensure that the documents receive royal assent before the new financial year. Importantly, the budget is also not a balance sheet. It doesn't simply list what the government owns and owes, but instead projects the financial flows of the federal government that it expects over the coming years and across the forward estimate period. Broadly speaking, the budget documents can be grouped into four key sections. The first is the government's fiscal outlook, an assessment of the national economy and projections for the next 4 years, often referred to as the forward estimates. This exists to provide a medium-term outlook of the federal government's fiscal position, typically the budget year plus the 3 following years. They serve a crucial rolling baseline for financial planning and accountability. The second is the government's policy priorities for the coming years, or its budget strategy, which is mostly the goals and ideas of government ministers that they often discuss in front of the media. The third is regarding how much revenue the government expects to collect and from whom, or called revenue forecasts. And the fourth part of the document is how the government plans to allocate and spend that revenue, often called revenue estimates. In a Western country such as Australia, its goal is to adjust spending and revenue to respond to economic conditions, attempting to mitigate or flatten the volatile effects of our business cycle and to ensure stable growth. At its core, the budget contains most of the fiscal policy tools that the government can use to shape our economy and comprises of two main things. The first is revenue or inflows, which includes both taxation, progressive and regressive taxes, as well as non-tax revenue such as fees, interest, dividends, and government-owned enterprises. The second is expenditures or outflows, and they include operating expenses, capital expenditure, and transfer payments. Depending on economic conditions, past policy decisions, and broader circumstances, the budget may result in a surplus, a deficit, or balance. If revenue exceeds expenditure, the government then records a surplus. If expenditure exceeds revenue, it records a deficit. When faced with a deficit, a government has several options. It can raise taxes to increase revenue, cut spending to reduce outflows, borrow to finance the shortfall, or restructure assets and operations through measures such as privatisation or corporatisation. A deficit is generally considered bad as it can result in increased public debt, add inflationary pressures, and reduce fiscal flexibility, which can result in things like cuts to future programs, servicing the debt, and a greater burden on future generations. However, when running a surplus, the government may choose to pay down the debt, reduce taxes, increase investment or savings, or return funds directly to taxpayers through rebates and subsidies. While governments often aim to bring budgets into surplus, these can also be negative for the economy by slowing down growth, which can increase unemployment and result in underinvestment in government services. However, in more extreme economic circumstances such as war, recession, or market failure, a single measure might not be enough to address the budget's sustainability or issues within the economy. requiring government to undertake multiple measures. Strong fiscal stimulus, redistributive policy, contractionary policy, and austerity are some ways a government may address a challenging environment, but all have their trade-offs and effects in the economy, so it is up to a government on what policies it will implement in order to stabilise the budget. With that out of the way, it's also probably worth looking at how government spending is treated within the budget, as not all of it is equal. Spending is divided into two broad categories: special or mandatory appropriations and discretionary spending. Special appropriations are ongoing legislative payments that occur automatically under existing law, such as welfare payments and entitlements. These make up a majority of the budget, typically more than 70%. Discretionary spending, by contrast, is what the government actually decides on each year through the annual budget process. It accounts for roughly 20 to 30% of total spending. So when politicians and commentators discuss the budget, they're usually referring to this portion. With all of that out of the way, we've hopefully made the budget easier for you to understand. And it's also worth mentioning some of the misconceptions and confusion that comes with it though. Often the budget is compared to that of a household or a company's balance sheet by politicians. However, it's much more complicated and functions differently. Where a household budget or balance sheet might simply record income and expenditure, the federal budget serves as both planning and as a policy tool. It not only tracks revenue and spending, but also shapes economic activity, allocates resources across sectors, and signals priorities to the public. Unlike a household, the government can influence the economy through taxation and borrowing, and its balance sheet reflects contingent obligations such as future social security payments that have no real parallel to personal finance. Another misconception is that the budget changes every year, and while this is partially correct, only a small amount of the budget actually changes, with most of it consisting of automatic or ongoing payments, as we've outlined before, some of which have been there since Federation. Sometimes the budget is often thought of as an annual fixed plan, as it's often depicted and described as such during budget week. But many of its programs are actually multi-year commitments, and its figures are rarely set in stone. For example, in November, the government issues the Mid-Year Economic and Fiscal Outlook, often called MYEFO, along with any supplementary and emergency funding measures. In the months after the budget is handed down, you'll also sometimes hear that it has slipped into deficit or performed better than expected. These updates reflect just how dynamic and ever-changing the budget really is, rather than a rigid set of agenda. With all of this, we've provided you a detailed yet simple breakdown of what the budget is, and what it does, and how it goes about making the changes that affects our lives. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed our breakdown of the federal budget, be sure to subscribe and to leave your thoughts in the comments down below. If you prefer to listen to this video as a podcast, please click here to visit our Spotify page, where we regularly upload these. Lastly, I'd like to thank our team for making this video possible. Your support has been crucial in ensuring we can create quality content. Once again, I'm Heath. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.